Another important component that you have to address within the discussion is also being able to say, or being able to show that what you are offering up as an explanation is likely a legitimate explanation. So we normally go through a process of eliminating other possible explanations, right? So why are you calling it this and not calling it that? And that's usually about showing how what you have done is different from what is already known and what it adds to that existing knowledge in order to qualify as new, and what sort of arguments you are presenting to show that it's not just new, but it's also valid. Because creating new knowledge all the time is quite easy, but creating valid knowledge that people can build on in future research, that's a harder task. And that's what you have to demonstrate in your discussion section. So when I have done that, this is probably my section 6.2 or 6.1 of the discussion. I'm going to then spend some time on talking about, now that I have shown you this new information and I have given you some insight into how it is new and how it is valid, I am going to talk about what the implications are for us going forward in terms of how we do research. So maybe I can say in the future, anyone who does research in this area must consider these factors. Otherwise, whatever knowledge they generate is not going to be that valuable. Or maybe we need to work with these types of methods more because they help us to uncover certain things that we have not been able to until now because of the types of methods that we were using. But these implications for research are usually a very generic way of sort of talking to the field about how you need to think about research in this area in the future based on this knowledge that I've just created with my own process. And then you also, within the same section, usually will talk about the implications for practice, because the practical contributions, the societal value becomes more important in a lot of disciplines now. So you are going to have to say, okay, so if a manager were to pick up my work, what sort of things can they learn from this work that is going to help them in making decisions? So maybe how do they think in a more nuanced way about the problems that they've got? How do they use resources more efficiently based on this information that we have? So maybe you say, if you face this situation, you don't need to apply this expensive solution because you're not going to get a better result than going for the cheapest option, for example. But you really have to link concretely the insights that you present in section 6.2 to what it means for decision makers and how they can improve their decisions based on what you have found. And then after that, they will be, at least in the way that I approach this, I also always like to spend some time talking about then the research limitations and what can be done in future research. Actually, we all have to talk about research limitations. So section 6.4, is it 6.4 now? Yes. So so section 6, you just say, this is what this research set out to do. This is what it finds to be. This is what it finds that already aligns with the literature. 6.1, you're going to say, here are the things that are new. I'm going to qualify the ways in which they are new. So maybe they offer a bit more nuance, or they contradict what was known, or they were missed completely. So this is something that's completely new. And you're going to spend time within that section eliminating alternative explanations and actually showing that your arguments are valid, and preferably also putting together a set of propositions that help us to get explanations for the phenomenon that you have got, because that is the strongest link that you can make to theory. Then after this, you're going to go to section 6.2. You're going to discuss the research implications. So implications of my work for current research, how we are going to do research and think about research going forward, and implications for practice, how decision makers, managers are going to use these insights to make better decisions. And then the final section is going to be a reflection on the limitations. So even if I have done all this work and I found all these wonderful things, I must offer up the limitations of my study, right? So if, for example, I actually would have benefited benefited from talking to a particular respondent group, but I was not able to talk to those respondents, I can say it will enrich our knowledge better, or the quality of the knowledge will improve if we're actually able to capture the insights from this stakeholder group, because they're important, but I wasn't able to capture their voice. I also actually always start this section by saying, I have offered up a set of propositions. So in future work, you can validate these propositions, right? You can test them to see if they will hold under particular conditions, because that talks about the generalizability and the value of theory in research. Then after that, I will address some limits that are related to the methods and how improving those things could lead to better insights going forward. And then I stop there. So I used to also talk about the contributions, but now I put the contributions in the introduction section. So when I've written out the discussion and I have this overview and I'm able to articulate very clearly what my contributions are and in the ways in which they are new, I go into the introduction section in my last paragraph and I articulate very clearly what the contributions are. It's not uncommon that you will see the contributions repeated in the discussion section again, but I've become an efficient writer. A lot of the journals I work for or I write for will give you something like, 8,000 words or a certain limit in terms of the number of pages double spaced. So there's no room to actually keep repeating yourself. So I've become more strategic in terms of where I place information. And I used to have a PhD supervisor who would say, if I've read it once, I've read it enough times. So this forced me to think about where are the good strategic places to place information so that I don't have to repeat myself. And so this is how I go about it. So this is all that you have to do with the discussion. And from this conversation, I hope it becomes clear how you can separate the discussion section and also embed the literature without regurgitating what you already told us in the literature review. So you are going to a whole other level in terms of what you're doing. So whereas in the literature review, you are forward looking, you're trying to create a roadmap for your research process, right? Like, how am I going to go about solving the puzzle? When it comes to the discussion section, you have arrived there. You have obtained some insights, and now you're holding up those insights to the mirror of existing knowledge and trying to see how valuable those insights are and trying to show how valuable the knowledge that you have created as part of your process is, and then projecting into the future to tell us about what potentially we can expect in terms of, well, the theory, the explanations you offer up, maybe in terms of the propositions that you're going to present, but also how we are going to approach research going forward, as well as how this changes how we make decisions in practice in relation to that issue. And then, of course, the limitations are so important. So the limitations we're expected to do, because in academic writing, we don't get things perfect. Anyone who says they have the perfect paper will be treated like a hypocrite, because they are. So we treat them like the hypocrite that they are, because it's impossible to get things perfect. There's so many limitations and constraints that we face. Some of them are cognitive, right? They're related to how our minds work and the limits of our minds. Some of them are resource-based, time even as a resource. We cannot do research forever. We just have to make an improvement to the existing knowledge, and then other people are going to take over from us and they're going to keep improving it. And then ideally we get to a situation where what we knew before is significantly better now, because we are standing on the shoulders of giants. We are building on the existing knowledge that was part of a very careful, very involved process, but with its own limits that we do recognize. But then we consistently work towards that mark of getting better all the time.